Welcome to this session of how to read your chart. Tonight we'll be identifying your superpowers, and if you don't have a chart in front of you, please be sure to grab one now at geneticmatrix.com, or you can also get a chart at humandesignamerica.com/chart. I particularly like that format. But there's lots of places to get a free chart. The important thing is to understand how to read it. So this session is for you if you are new to human design and you want to understand how to read your chart. You want a little bit of background on what is human design, where did it come from, what's the most important things to know, because there's so much information here. Where do you really focus? And then how do you understand it and actually apply it in your life? That's what we're going to get to today. And we will have some time for Q&A at the end. So let's go ahead and jump in. Brief description of who I am. My life changed about 4 years ago when I lost everything. I decided in a split second to, instead of checking out, I decided to let this be a catalyst for creating a whole new me and a whole new life. And so today I help mostly women in midlife transition create a life they actually want to live, mainly because that's what I did. I wanted to check out and I was going through all these big changes, and human design really helped me more than anything else as I tried out all the things that I've been teaching to my corporate clients for 20 years as a professional change manager. I tried them out on myself. I realized the missing component was energy. I learned about the human design energy blueprint. And ever since then, my life has been transformed because this human design energy blueprint tells us how to know ourselves, love ourselves, and learn self-care. And lo and behold, that was what was missing in my life. Who knew? So tonight we're going to talk about what is human design. It is called the science of differentiation. It's also been called the science of awakening. It is a way to really know who you are, and it does combine several ancient esoteric systems, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu Brahman chakra system, the several types of astrology, the Kabbalah, and quantum physics. So all of these things sound kind of out there to some people, but if you are here right now, then you have probably appreciated that there's something practical about human design. And interestingly enough, based on just a little bit of information, your date of birth, time of birth, and city of birth, voila, you end up with a code that helps you understand yourself. It's a lot like if astrology met Myers-Briggs and got married. What would it birth? Something like human design. Human design came from, it's kind of a weird story. The founder, his name is Ra Uru Hu. That was not his given name. He was actually an advertising and marketing executive. He had a strange encounter with something that he called the voice for 8 days on a deserted island. And what came out of that is a 400-page manual on how to live your life, how to understand who you are and what you're here for. All kinds of information, and it can be really overwhelming when you first learn about human design. And so this purpose of this session is really to help you know how to read your chart. When you get a chart, this is my chart, and it looks something like this. As I said, there's different places that you can get a chart, so it might look slightly different, but most of the charts will have this basic information. And so it can be really confusing to even know what all this is, or where to focus, or how to make sense of it. So in this session, we're going to talk about the most important things to focus on when you're first learning about your chart. And if you have been studying your chart for a while, but you want to explain it to someone else, the value of this particular session will give you some new terminology and some new ways of talking about it that might make more sense to people. Sometimes the woo-woo stuff is a little bit off-putting to new people. So tonight, or in this session, we're going to focus on how to know what to say and where to put your energy when you're just learning. We're going to talk about things in this order because if you only had 30 minutes with me, the most important things that I would cover are type, strategy, and authority. Because if you only know these three things, it can absolutely change your life, and it can help you to go from being frustrated or bitter or disappointed, depending on your type. Those are all examples of the not self theme. It can help you to experience the opposite, which is actually what you're designed to experience. We're going to go into that in just a few moments. But the point here is that these are the top three things that you can focus on and start to practice every day. They will change your life. Human design is has something called the experiment. Ra, the founder, called it the experiment, not because it's experimental, but because as you experiment with it, you start to incorporate it into your life, and that's when it really has value. Otherwise, it's just something you read about in a book, and it's, you know, nice to know, but it really starts to change your life when you start practicing. So in this session, we're going to talk about the most important things that you can practice when you're first learning your human design. The first thing is your type. I also call it your career type, because if you are considering switching careers or jobs, understanding your type can play a huge role in helping you understand how you best express yourself in the world, what you're designed to be and do. Now, if you have a chart in front of you, it's going to say one of these things, and you'll notice that throughout my slides, I'm using additional words that you may not have seen before. The purpose of that is to give you a greater sense in just a few words of what that role is really all about. So the original language is, most of us are 70%, and we fall into a big bucket, 70%, we're either generators or manifesting generators. The quantum language for these types is builders and time benders, or actually generators are also called alchemists. I like builders because it appeals to people who are not necessarily into the woo. Projectors make up 20% of the population, and that's what your chart will say, but in quantum language, it might say orchestrator or guide. And if you're a manifestor, that's what it says on your chart, you could also be called an initiator, and you have the energy of the ancient kings and queens, and your type makes up about 9% of the population. The really rare ones are the reflectors at 1%. They're also called calibrators. So let's look at the type, each of the types, a little bit more about them, and let's focus on what is their superpower. So generators are also called builders or alchemists. Like I mentioned, they make up about 35% of the population. They're really slow and steady builders. If this is your type, you are meant to go through stages. And you're very good at following a process, A to B, B to C, C to D. You're designed for mastery. And so you are the type that is designed for, you can handle a 9-to-5 job, because you can do the same thing over and over and get better at it all the time. And that's what the mastery is about. You have the energy to build and create, and that comes from your sacral motor here, which is super important. It's what determines that you are a generator. So it's this little red square on your chart. If you have that, then you are either a generator or a manifesting generator. And you have the potential for perfection. That's because you're designed for mastery. And if you keep going over and over the same things throughout your life, and you work in the same industry or in the same type of job or career for many years, you will get very good at whatever you're doing. And that is a type of superpower that you can actually get to perfection, because the other types are not designed for that. Another way to look at your superpower would be like a marathon runner. You are a marathon runner in the game of life. You might need support with big picture planning. You are going to do really good in groups, and you may need to outsource what's not in your genius zone, but it's important that you're patient and you don't compare yourself with others, because you are unique. You are here to create order out of chaos. That's what the Alchemist is about. If you're a manifesting generator, you're also called an express builder or a time bender. And as I go through each of these types, I want you to think about the people in your life, maybe a partner or family or friends, and see if you can put them in one of these buckets. The reason that's important is because once you can determine their type, that can tell you so much about how to best interact with them and how to get the most out of your relationship. I do also offer a relationship session where we look at your type and your chart and the chart of another, and we go into much more detail. But even just knowing the information about your type can make a huge difference in interacting with somebody that you know and love. So this type also happens to be my type. We are fast and efficient builders. With a focus on fast and efficient, we're like the express builders. So we're the only type that's designed for multitasking. It doesn't mean that we always should multitask, but we have the capacity to do it, and sometimes that serves us well. Now, what works really well about that is we're able to skip steps and to intuitively know what steps we can skip, but often we skip things that we have to go back and fix later. Because we jump around a lot, we are designed to be the jack of all trades or the Jill of all trades. So we tend to like to have our hands in things, getting them dirty, being part of the thing that we're creating. And that's different than the other types. So just pointing that out, we are able to find the easiest ways to do things, or maybe the most efficient way. We do well in sprints, working in sprints and then resting, because our energy is kind of all over the place because we're kind of jumping around. There's nothing wrong with us. You might have been called ADD when you were younger, and there's really nothing wrong with you. Your mind is just meant for your design is meant for something different than the majority. So if you are this type, you may need support with the big picture planning, and you may need to learn how to pause before you respond. That's really important because that is your strategy. We'll get into that a little bit later. You can be seen as flaky. Why? Because you're jumping around all the time. And it's important to ask yourself yes or no questions all the time, because you might think you're going to go forward with something and then change your mind at the last second. And that is perfectly within your capacity as a manifesting generator. And it's not so with the other types. So know that there's nothing wrong with you if you change your mind at the last minute. It's especially when you're learning to use your inner authority, your inner guidance system, as I call it, because that will help you know what's correct for you. Projectors, like I mentioned, make up about 20% of the population. They're kind of great architects. They can step back and see the big picture. They can be highly influential, great influencers. They are here to be recognized for their wisdom. They're like lighthouses. They need to get comfortable in the spotlight because they may not be. They're very good one-on-one. They have a very different kind of aura, which we will talk about in another session, but their aura is particularly good at focusing on one person and really helping to guide them, thus the name guide or orchestrator. They're great at designing new things. They're great at team management. They make really good project managers. They do need to be aware of burnout if they're not aligned with their purpose, because they can have limited energy resources. They do not have the sacral motor, the red one right in the center that makes generators generators. Therefore, their energy goes in peaks and valleys, and they're just not able to keep up with the generators. And again, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just not designed for the typical 9-to-5 jobs. They can be seen as too sensitive. They need to take time to relax often. They need a lot of rest, and often they get called lazy. They need to wait to be recognized to share their wisdom. They're not necessarily lazy. They have a different type of energy, and they're only meant to take action in certain situations when they're invited and when that invitation fits with their authority. So we'll get more into that in just a minute. So their superpower is they are able to guide others very, very well. Manifestors also are called initiators or innovators, making up 9% of the population. They could be called developers. They're great at visualization. They're charismatic, powerful, energizing aura. Notice that their aura down here is very different. They have a closed and repelling aura, which allows them to have space to be able to create and do what they're here to do. they are here to initiate. So they're often the type that will be the fire starter, the trailblazer, or the pioneer. That's if they're living according to their type. They can also be very charismatic, powerful, energizing aura for others. They're great at starting things and coming up with good ideas. They're here to make things happen. They can be like the light and fire and then the bounce in a party. But they need the generator types to actually do the work. They're here to direct the work of the generators. So they're not really made for the typical 9-to-5 schedule. Again, their energy can vary because they don't have that generator motor. They will have one or more of the other motors, but it's not consistent energy, and that's why they're not made for the 9-to-5 schedule. Reflectors, again, are very rare, also called a karmic mirror or a calibrator. They make up just 1% of the population. You could think of them as interior designers. They're very good at reading people's energy. Notice that their aura is very different. It's called sampling. And so they're like giant antennas. They're just picking up all kinds of information, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. They're just amazingly intuitive. They're very good at creating meaningful connections, and they can easily assimilate into different kinds of environments and communities. Their role is actually meant to be in a community to facilitate and coordinate information and connection between people. They are a mirror for other people. They absorb or reflect the energy of the person they're engaging with. They have to take a lot of time for their decisions, a whole month. So if you know someone like this, please don't criticize them. They may really need a whole month to make a decision. They may not be like you and be able to make a quick decision. They need supportive, high vibe people around them because they're so affected by the people that are and their surroundings, their physical environment. Because again, their aura is all open. Their centers are all open. So they're picking up all kinds of information, and that can be very fatiguing for them. So rest is crucial. So those are some of the superpowers of the types and a little bit more about where their career would best, what kind of career would be most suitable for them. Now, the second most important thing that you can understand about your chart is your strategy. It's called strategy on the chart. I like to call it your personal interaction strategy. And this is really how you best are meant to interact with others. This is a way, I think, an easier way to remember it or to integrate this information. Remember that there's no one size fits all for any careers. We're actually taught that we just need to do X, Y, Z to be successful and fit in. But what human design teaches is that we are all unique and that opportunities come to us. We don't have to chase them down. Actually, the manifestors are the only type that are designed to initiate. But for the vast majority of us, we will attract the right opportunities. So it's important to know what our strategy is in interacting with others, because relationships are so important in helping us to live the life we want to have. The strategy for manifestors, also called innovators, is to inform others first and then initiate or act. The reason this is so important is because they must first speak what's going to happen, because when they do, they will create an action that will move things, and they want to let people know what's going to happen so that people can get out of their way. They're very powerful. They're here to start things. So in order for them to live according to their strategy, they have to be conscious of their words, because they really have the power to create with words more than any other type. We all have everything in the chart, but that is one of their specialties. They can create with their words. Very powerful. Some famous innovators or manifestors that you might recognize here. Now, if you are a builder, meaning a generator, or a time bender, a manifesting generator, you have a very different strategy. Your strategy is to wait to respond. Now, for the generators, that means wait for something to respond to, or respond before engaging. That's another way to look at it. If you are a manifesting generator, remember that you are a hybrid of two different types, both the manifestors and the generators. And so your strategy is very similar to the generators. You have to wait for something to respond to, but there are a few extra steps in here that can help you even more. First of all, you want to wait to respond. So wait for something in your physical environment to show up to respond to. That's going to be something that you can see, smell, taste, feel, or touch. So you're waiting for something in your physical environment, like an email or a phone call or a sign, something like that. You're going to envision in your mind's eye, what is it that you want to happen now? Then you speak it, you inform others, and then you take action. So a few more steps there, but if you learn those as a manifesting generator and you follow that strategy for interacting with others, you will be very, very successful, because that's living according to your design. So you never want to initiate anything. That we're all designed to, most of us are designed to wait for something to respond to. All of us have to wait for something. It's only the manifestors that are meant to initiate. So be conscious if you're finding yourself frustrated as one of these types, you might be initiating. So pause on the initiation and wait for something to respond to. Here are some famous builders or generators that I'm sure you are familiar with, and some famous time benders too. Any type can fulfill any role on the planet, really, but some are suited for, different things, or they're going to go about them differently. So if you're a projector, your strategy is going to be wait for the invitation. And so remember, the projectors are also called orchestrators, and you need to wait to be recognized and invited. That's because your energy reserves as a projector type are limited. And so you're meant to focus only on those people who recognize you and invite you. Now, this doesn't mean that you need an invitation to go to the grocery store. You need to wait for the big things, though: friendship, romance, jobs, where to live. You always want to wait to be invited or asked before sharing your gifts of guidance and direction with others. Otherwise, you will get burned out and you will become very bitter. I'm referencing the not self theme on your chart if you're a projector. And here are some famous projectors or orchestrators. You'll notice that there are world leaders of all types. Calibrators are another word for reflectors. They are lunar beings, so very, very different type of energy. They have a different makeup completely. They have to wait and assess. They have to go through a very long process to understand what's correct for them in order to make a decision. And they're here to observe, so they just need a lot of time, and they need a lot of space too, because their charts are open. Again, meaning they pick up all kinds of information, and in order to process it and assimilate it and then let it go, now that takes a lot of time. So 29 days for them to make a decision. And here's a famous calibrator. They're only 1% of the population, so they are definitely more rare. Here's a summary. You might want to screenshot this if you are wanting a cheat sheet. So here's your human design chart reference down the middle, and then this is your reference for a career type on the left-hand side, and then your personal interaction strategy on the right. Everybody has a different strategy, and notice that everyone has to wait. Even the manifestors have to wait for correct timing. The third most important thing for you to know in your chart is something called your inner, well, I call it your inner guidance system. It will also be called authority on your chart. What I want you to see in this slide is that your decision-making strategy is the way that you're meant to make the best possible decision for you. And notice that there's so many different ways. Each of these colors in these chakras represents a different way of knowing. And most of us are going to fall into one of these three categories. But what I want you to see is that there's a lot of ways to know what's correct for you. And it means that we're all different. There's no one size fits all. And it's also important to know yourself because we're all different. The other thing that I want you to see is that Making decisions is really about learning to listen to your body. It's in your physical body in most cases. The mental projector is the only exception where their energy is up in their head, but still it's about listening to your body. And the reason I make a point of that is because in the society, we are conditioned and programmed to think everything through, and notice that our thinking is up here in the head, in the mind chakra, way up here, but all the motors are down here. We haven't covered that yet, but when, as you study human design more, you'll understand that your motors are way down here. And what you want to do is listen to your body when you're making a decision for you. So on your chart, after type and strategy, after type, next thing is strategy, then it's authority. So what you're looking for on your chart, it will say inner authority. If you're a generator type, you're meant to wait to respond, and you will have either emotions as your authority or your sacral voice, that's your gut, as your authority. We'll get into the details about this in just a minute, but just so you see who has what. The projectors, again, they have to wait to be recognized and invited. That's their strategy. And they know if they're going to, if this is a correct invitation for them, by listening to their inner authority. They can have all these different types of inner authorities. And this is the emotions, this is the intuition, this is their will as an authority. It's their will center. This is their identity center, and the sounding board is the technique that the mental projectors need. It's really about hearing themselves speak, because they need to talk it through, not to get advice, but to hear themselves say it out loud, and they will understand what's correct for them after they hear themselves talking about it. So if you know somebody that likes to talk a lot and seems like they have to just talk about everything, especially when they're making decisions, they might be a mental projector. Manifestors are here to inform before taking action. Remember, that's their strategy. And they can have 3 different kinds of authority. Everyone will only have one primary type, but they might have emotions as their authority, they might have their intuition, or they might have their will as their authority. Notice that the manifestor has a motor to the throat. So these are the motors, and they're connected directly or indirectly to the throat. That's what makes a manifestor. Reflectors, notice how different they are. They're completely white. Their chart is all open. They might have some color here in the lines, in the gates and channels, but their centers are all open. Remember again that that's their ability to pick up information. You're receiving information in your open centers. It's also where you store your pain. So when you're looking at your chart, and as you learn more about it, you'll learn more about the centers and what they each mean. That's not going to be something we're going to cover in this particular session, but I just want you to notice how different the reflectors are. They're all white. And so they need a whole lunar cycle, 28 or 29 days, to wait and discuss in order to know what's correct for them. So they need a lot of time. Now we're going to focus on the 3 most common types of authority. About 50% of people have what's called an emotional authority or solar plexus. Now on the chart, this will look like a colored in triangle over on the far right side. It's called the emotional authority, and it's referenced as an emotional wave. What this means is that if you are emotionally defined, and that's what we call you if you have this one colored in, this energy center, it means that you're going to have a process when you're trying to make a decision that will take some time. So you're here to learn patience, and you may need to sleep on it before you make a decision. It means that you don't want to let anyone rush you into making a decision, because decisions made inside your wave will be different. If you make a decision while you're up high on your wave, it's going to be a very different decision than very low on your wave. And so as your wave crashes, like the waves on a shore, you will finally get clarity. And that's what you're looking for before you make a decision. You want a clear yes or no. So you want to wait for that wave to crash until you get that clarity. So you want to become aware of your emotions so that you can see the patterns. Now, this probably isn't going to happen for you overnight. This is something that you'll want to track, like women track their menstrual cycle, for instance, to know where they are in their body cycle. Similarly, you may want to track your emotions to be able to see the patterns for you. There are 3 specific patterns. There's the high highs and the low lows, and then the middle kind of a wave. And so depending on your chart, then that will determine what type of wave you have. But it's important that you wait for that wave to crash so that you have clarity before you make a decision. That's the most common type of authority, is emotions. The second most common type is called sacral, and this is the generator or manifesting generator sacral energy center. It's the red one right in the middle. And if you have that defined, you do have access to the most significant energy in the universe, according to the founder of human design. And the reason for that is because when you're doing work that you find that you love or that you find satisfying, you will have endless amounts of energy. So if you have that defined and it says authority, sacral authority, that means that your gut is your authority for making decisions. Again, you're looking for a clear yes or no. And if you have somebody asking you questions, yes or no questions, to help you make that decision, it's called a sacral session. If you had a session with me, if you had a big life event coming up or big decisions to make and you want to make sure they're correct, please consider scheduling some time with me to do a sacral session where we can really hear. I can teach you how to listen to your body. You can get a clear message from your body. You'll get or and we'll ask you some questions, and you'll see. You'll probably be surprised at what your body says, because it'll be different than what your mind is saying. And that's always going to lead you to satisfaction. I just want to point you to your chart. That will say, it will say satisfaction on your chart. That's because you're designed for satisfaction. You're meant to be in that state. And you're only meant to be in your not self theme of frustration as a guidepost to say, hey, get back on your path. When you are learning to tap into your sacral center and you're learning to listen to your body and hear what it says, you may feel your body being pulled towards something or away from something. And what you want to do is wait to get a full bodied gut response and then take action. So you ask yourself, is this correct for me? There's techniques that I can share with you about muscle testing, where your body, you're learning how to listen to your body to get a clear answer for what's correct for you. And the third most common type, about 10% of people have a splenic inner authority. This is when your spleen is defined on the far left, that triangle. And if this is your authority and it says splenic authority or splenic knowing, then it means you have an instant knowing. You have an instinctive advisor in your body that's going to help you to know right away what your instinct is about something. And it will probably take time to learn how to read that, to learn how to listen for that still small voice, but you will get guidance through your spleen. And again, we all have all of the chart, so we all have access to this splenic authority sometimes. But if it's defined for you, meaning if it's colored in and it says inner authority splenic or spleen, that means this is your primary way of understanding what's correct for you. Now, I will say that if you have all three of these ways of knowing, I would call it the bonus plan, because you have access to all three, but always the emotions are going to trump everything else. That's a very, very powerful motor, and it's going to be the strongest and the most obvious. So if you have both, the sacral and the emotions, it's always going to be the emotions that are going to trump the sacral. And as you tune into your body and you learn how to listen, sometimes you will be able to make quick decisions with your sacral if you're emotionally defined. But for the big decisions, you definitely want to sleep on it, give yourself plenty of time, and be sure that it's correct for you before you proceed. And you'll always know if it's correct for you if you feel satisfaction after you make the decision. If you feel frustration, that will be a sign to you that you got off your path and you want to revisit the process. Well, those are the three most important things that you can know about your chart is your type and your strategy and your inner authority. I'm going to share with you one more thing, which is fun, and it is an important aspect of knowing yourself. It's called your profile on your chart, and I like to refer to it as your public role. There are actually 12 different types. You'll have two numbers. You'll have the first number, which is your conscious line. It just means it's the part of you that you recognize most as you. And then the second number is what we call your unconscious line, and that's the part of you that you will know better over time as you become older and more mature. It's also the side of you that other people can more easily see. But you'll most identify probably with the first number the most. Let's take a look at these 6 numbers. Like I said, there are 12 of them. And if you're wondering how common is your profile or public role, this information was taken from Jovian Archive. And what you see is that there are some really common types, and then there are some really uncommon types. And for the most part, the most common types are about 15%, 14.5% of the population. And then the minority types, 1 4s, 2 5s, 3 6s, 4 1s, 5 2s, and 6 3s make up about 2% of the population, 2 and a fraction. So that will give you a sense. And in terms of compatibility, now I wouldn't choose a partner necessarily just based on this, but it's interesting to know that there is some pairing compatibility. It's really just about harmony between certain types. So that's something else that we can go into in a personalized reading if you're curious about that. Let's go ahead and look at each of the numbers one at a time. We'll look through all 6 numbers, and if you have whatever 2 numbers you have, maybe make some notes on what are those for you, the characteristics that really resonate for you. So the first line is the Investigator. This career type is intended to be an authority or a resource in their public life or in their public role. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that this is your job title, but this is an important part of who you are. And you'll find that if you're a 1 line, you are all about laying the information foundation for the security and safety of all of us. So you tend to have a broader view of wanting to know the details just to make sure that everyone is safe and secure. You do bring that introspective process of research in order to establish a solid foundation. Okay, so they're the ones that are going to say, okay, what are we talking about? Let's define our terms. Because they're always investigating. They're always asking a lot of questions and seeking thoroughness. They might be very insatiably curious, and they need to understand before they can do anything. If you have a child that always needs to understand why, it's a very good chance they might be a 1 line. And so it's important that you understand that about them and give them reasons so that they can get that information foundation before they make decisions. Their focus tends to be a fear of the unknown. That's a significant key to know about somebody who is a 1 line. So if you're in a relationship with a 1 line, know that fear of the unknown may be something significant that will drive them. And you'll see that 1 line is in quite a few profiles, the 1 3, the 1 4, the 4 1, and the 5 1. The 2 line is also called the responder or the natural. On the chart, according to traditional human design, it's called the Hermit. The 2 line is about integrating knowledge, energy, and wisdom and waiting for the readiness of others to call them out. So the Hermit really spends their time in their office or their home, and they're doing their thing. They're not really concerned about what anybody else is doing because they're focused on just doing their thing in their space. But they are designed to be called out when they get too much in their shell. Somebody will give them a call. If they're a 4 line, it'll be somebody from their network. If they're a 5 line like me, they'll get called out to be the savior of the general in time of trouble. We'll get to that in just a minute. To share their gifted way of thinking. If you're a 2 line, you like or need alone time. When I first learned about human design, I didn't think I needed alone time. My sister would joke that the only alone time I needed was as long as it would take to brush my teeth. So this did not really resonate with me initially when I learned about it 4 years ago, but I will say that as I have learned more about my design, I've realized that I do actually need alone time. And I can kind of get irritated when somebody interrupts my alone time and I don't have my space. So the 2 line has a shy or coy aspect to them. They have an intrapersonal, they're all about the intrapersonal kind of relationships, and their focus is aloneness, whether they want to be alone or they don't want to be alone. You know, it's interesting. I used to think that I had a fear of being alone. So that focus, you know, aloneness, I mean, I'm a 2/5, so there it is. And you'll see that this 2 line is seen in, again, the 2/4s, the 2/5s, the 5/2s, and the 6/2s. So four out of 12 profiles are going to have at least 1 2 in them. If you're a 3 line, you are an explorer, or what's called a martyr in traditional human design language. Now, this can be a challenging profile to have, only because society doesn't always reward or appreciate the adventuresome and resilient experiential learners that are the 3 lines, the explorers. If you're a 3 line, you're learning through different experiences, through trial and error. You're essentially bumping into things and people. You probably have had or will have a lot of experiences in your life that are physically, something about learning with your hands, with your body. There's something very, very tactile about your character and about your design. And that's because you're meant to explore the world and learn about it through your senses, through your hands, through your exploring. You're here to be an expert in what works and what doesn't based on your experience. You've never made a mistake because it's all a learning opportunity. Again, the 3 lines have that intrapersonal focus and also a fear of failing. If you're in a relationship with the 3 line, that's an important thing to know, that they have a fear of failing. And so you want to be conscious of that to help, you know, let that not be an issue between you. And you'll see the 3 line in these profiles: 1 3, 3 5, 3 6, and 6 3. The 4 line is called the influencer or the opportunist in traditional human design, and their greatest influence is to their friends and their network. They tend to have more of a brotherhood or sisterhood kind of an energy. And if you're in a relationship with the 4 line, they're not necessarily all about the sex. They are more about the kindred connection, the familial, familiar bond. They're the heart and service of the community. They're the first ones to share the opportunities with their friends. And they remind us of the importance of kinship and meaningful connection. And they're the ones that are going to keep us all together during the important times. They are a little uncomfortable with limbo. They like to have focus. If you're familiar with the 4 line in astrology or in numerology, the 4 line is all about structure. And so they like to have structure and a framework, kind of a solid foundation. They can have a fear of loss as a focus, and you will see this 4 line in the 1 4, the 2 4, the 4 1, and the 4 6 profiles. The 5 line is also called the messenger or the visionary leader. They have a mysterious and seductive energy. They can be very compelling and persuasive. They have a projection field. They live in a projection field, and people tend to see them either as a demon or a savior type. The reason is because people project onto them whatever they think the other person might be or do, and it's not necessarily true. So the 5 profile is also very challenging. It can be challenging just because they're often called upon to be the general in times of trouble. And it's very important that if you're a 5 line, you listen to your authority, your inner authority, and you follow your strategy to be sure that you are answering only the correct calls for you to be that general in time of trouble. The 5 line has a challenge of familiarity breeding contempt. And so the 5 lines don't stay around forever. I'm a 5 line, and I would find myself getting moved on from project to project, not because I wasn't good at what I was doing, but when I solved the problem, they would really not need me anymore, and they would go on with their work, and I would move on to the next project. So that's another way of looking at familiarity breeds contempt. They challenge the traditional values in order to universalize something new. So the 5 lines, because they're the visionary leaders, are also messengers, and they're going to be wanting to make a point of certain things and apply it to everything. They're going to universalize something new and something that might be a little bit out there, might be seen as very innovative, or certainly outside the box. They are here to have impact, and they are catalysts for change. It's funny, I'm a 2-5, and I'd always put catalyst for positive change on my LinkedIn profile for like the last 20 years, and that was well before I learned about human design. The focus of a 5 line is not feeling seen or not being seen. And the reason this happens is because they live in this projection field. And, you know, again, it may or may not be true what people project onto them. The profiles that have the 5 line are the 2-5, the 3-5, the 5-1, and the 5-2. The last line we're going to look at tonight is the leader, the 6 line, which is also called the role model. If you are a 6 line, you're often sought out for your advice and your life experience because you've been there and done that. You either will or already have experienced 3 distinct phases of your life. They tend to be 0 to 30, 30 to 50, and then 50 plus. Now, the reason for having 3 different phases of your life is so that you can have been there and done that on just about everything. Having 3 different lives, almost like a cat has 9 lives, gives you the potential to have so many different kinds of experiences that you can really become a role model to others and lead by example. That is your purpose, big part of your purpose when you're a 6 line. You are also, you tend to be a great teacher who shares your wisdom from your fascinating life experience. If you're a 6 line, you've probably done all kinds of cool things that people wouldn't guess by looking at you. And so when you start talking, people can see you as detached and mystical, because you have a high perspective, a high vision perspective, and you can kind of put everything in context because you've had so many experiences. You might have a focus of fear of failing the mission. You'll notice that there's a lot of similarities between the 6 line and the 3 line. That fear of failing for the 3 line is very similar to the fear of the 6 line, which is fear of failing the mission. If you have a 6 line in your profile, you will either be a 3-6, a 4-6, a 6-2, or a 6-3. I need to fix this slide. So we talked about your type, your strategy, your personal interaction strategy, and your inner guidance system or your authority. We also talked about your profile or your career, your public role. So those are the things that we have covered now in this session. And if you want to know more, please schedule time with me at humandesignreview.com. Right now I'm offering introductory quantum business and career design overviews specific to you. We can do a deep dive on your profile. We can do a quantum relationship assessment where we look at what are there's 4 characteristics in there, the areas of attraction, areas of friendship, areas of compromise, and areas of domination. And that's very interesting to see the dynamic with any 2 people. And so that can really help you to maximize the potential of your relationship. And if you're struggling to know what is your life purpose, or you want to consider a different career, there is an Activate Your Life Purpose session, which is 2 one-hour sessions where we look specifically at your incarnation cross, which is one of the things I mentioned at the very beginning. It is important. It makes up 70% of your purpose in this life, but it's very complex. And so if you're just starting out, this can be a very confusing thing to look into, and that's why we did not cover it in this session. Thank you again for joining me for this session of how to read your chart.